You always wanted to know what other people were thinking. You dreamed about it as a kid. You wished for it on birthdays. Mind reading, the most coveted superpower in human history. Well, this morning you wake up, and you have it. And in exactly 4 seconds, you're going to wish you'd never woken up at all. It's 7:16 a.m. You open your eyes. The ceiling of your bedroom looks the same as always. Everything seems normal. And then it happens. It's not a sound. It's more like what happens when you open a window in an unfamiliar city, and all at once you get hit by traffic noise, a conversation on the sidewalk, a radio from some floor above you, and a baby crying 3 buildings away. All of it at the same time. All of it with no volume dial. All of it inside your head. Except it's not noise. It's thoughts. Your upstairs neighbor has been doing the math for 10 minutes on whether he can afford to quit his job. The woman next door is thinking about a guy she's not going to text because she's scared. The man on the 3rd floor is drinking his coffee and thinking about his dead mother with a grief so dense and so old it crushes your chest, even though you've never met her and know nothing about her life. All of it, simultaneously. No pause, no filter, no off switch. You sit up in bed. Mistake. Because sitting up means moving, and moving means picking up new signals. The mail carrier climbing the stairs is thinking he's been doing this job for way too long. The little girl on the 1st floor is daydreaming about a pink unicorn, and somehow that is the only beautiful thing you've received in the last 30 seconds. But it doesn't last. Because her mother is in the kitchen thinking that her relationship ended 2 years ago, even though neither of them has said it out loud yet. You know things you never wanted to know. And you haven't even left your apartment. You spend the first 20 minutes lying completely still, trying to understand what's happening. The phenomenon has its own logic. The closer someone is to you, the stronger and clearer their mental stream comes through. Beyond 50 meters, it's background noise. Within 2 meters, it's like someone talking directly into your ear, even though they haven't opened their mouth. You don't always receive exact words. Sometimes you do. Full sentences with a clarity that turns your blood cold. But most of the time, it's something more primitive. Images, sensations, emotions with such a specific texture that you know exactly where they're coming from. One person's anxiety has a different color than another person's. A child's fear tastes different from an adult's. And guilt is the most recognizable thing of all, because it smells the same on everyone. You start to understand that human beings think in a way that is far more chaotic, more honest, and more brutal than anything they ever show. The gap between what people say and what they actually think is an abyss. An abyss you just fell head first into. And that's not even half of what's waiting for you once you step outside. You can't stay home forever. You go down to the corner store. There's a woman waiting for the bus 5 meters away. She's thinking about her grocery list, about how her knee keeps getting worse, about how her daughter doesn't call as often as she should. All of that in the time it takes you to walk 3 steps. The woman looks at you, smiles, says, "Good morning," in a friendly voice. And you already know 3 intimate things about her life that she hasn't told anyone this week. The store has 17 people inside. You know that before you walk in, because you can feel them. A couple in the canned goods aisle is having the most intense argument of their relationship. Completely in silence, completely invisible to any outside observer, and perfectly audible to you. The cashier is thinking about picking up her son at 4, about how she hasn't slept well in 3 nights, about how you remind her of someone she knew years ago. And there's a small, old sadness wrapped around that thought that has nothing to do with you, but still gets under your skin anyway. That'll be 6:42. Thank you, you say. And you mean it more than she could possibly imagine, because right now she's the only person on the planet who doesn't know you can read her mind. And somehow that makes her the most honest interaction you've had all morning. You go home. In 4 minutes, you've picked up fragments from the inner lives of about 43 people. And you already understand, this isn't a gift. It's a sentence. The first major problem isn't the volume. The first major problem is what you discover about the people you love most. You call your best friend. You make plans to grab coffee. He shows up, hugs you, says, "Dude, you okay? You seem off." And while he's saying it, he's thinking about how you've been slow to respond to his texts for a week, and how that bothers him more than he's ever going to tell you. You sit across from him. He talks. You're listening to 2 conversations at the same time. The one happening out loud, between the coffee cups and the napkins, and the one happening in his head, where the sentences are shorter, more direct, and considerably less kind. It's not that your friend is a bad person. It's exactly the opposite. He's a completely normal person. And normal people have thoughts they would never say out loud, because those thoughts are instinctive, contradictory, sometimes petty, exactly like yours. The difference is that you no longer have access only to your own. You find out there's a joke you tell too often that stopped being funny to him a long time ago, but he never said anything because he didn't want to hurt you. None of this makes your friend a traitor. But after that afternoon over coffee, you can't look at the friendship the same way, and there's no fixing that. Now, imagine the same thing with your family. Your mom. You meet her for lunch. Every sentence you exchange has an invisible counterpart. When she asks about work, she's thinking she wishes you'd chosen something more stable. When she tells you you look good, she feels relief, but also a maternal doubt that never fully goes away. And then, without warning, she thinks about you with pure love. No hidden layer, no catch. And you almost start crying right there in the middle of the restaurant. Not because she thinks badly of you, but because you've spent days swimming inside people's heads. And this is the first time you found something in there that is nothing but love, no strings attached. And you hadn't realized how badly you needed it. You discover something at that lunch. Human beings invented courtesy, invented social filters, invented the distance between thought and speech, not to deceive each other, to survive together. Because if the full, unfiltered truth were always said out loud, no relationship would last a week. You no longer have that filter, and what comes next confirms it. Months pass. You carry the ability as best you can. You develop strategies. You learn to let yourself get overwhelmed on purpose in crowded spaces. To let the mental noise go white and undifferentiated. Like an ocean you've stopped hearing, even though you're still swimming in it. You learn that kids think faster, but with fewer layers. That teenagers think with an emotional intensity that literally hurts your chest if you get too close. That dogs emit something too. Not thoughts exactly, but something warm and completely honest that becomes your favorite way to rest your mind. You start to prefer the company of animals over people. And at that point, you don't see the warning sign. What you do see is the obvious potential: work, money, and edge. You go into sales. The first month is absurd. You know exactly what each customer needs to hear before they open their mouth. You know when there's room to negotiate. You know when someone is lying with a precision so sharp, you could transcribe the actual truth word for word. Your numbers are triple those of the second best person on the team. And that's where the real problem begins. When you know too much, when you can see the whole board with every piece and every future move, the game stops making sense. Human relationships work in part because of uncertainty. Because you don't know what the other person is going to say. Because of surprise. Because of the space between who someone is and what they show. You don't have that space. To you, people are transparent. And the transparent, over time, becomes invisible. Your coworkers start to feel like something's off with you. Nobody can put it into words. But there's something about the way you respond to things before they happen, the way you're never surprised by anything, that creates a vague discomfort. A distance that nobody consciously chose, but that's just there. You become efficient. You become successful. You become alone. The subject of romantic relationships deserves its own chapter, because it is, without question, where the ability transforms into the most cruel form of involuntary psychological torture that can exist. You meet someone. There's attraction. And in the first moment that person is near you, within 2 meters at that first coffee date, you already know whether you're attractive to them or not. You already know which part of you sparks their interest and which part makes them hesitate. You already know, with a precision no human being should ever have, whether they're thinking about their ex while they're talking to you. At first, you think it's an advantage. You only put yourself out there when you already know the outcome. And in doing so, you kill exactly what makes it worth it. Because love doesn't work without uncertainty. Without the vertigo of not knowing if the other person feels the same. Without the vulnerability of putting yourself out there with no guarantees. You have full insurance coverage in the most beautiful game in the world, and that turns it into something that feels more like paperwork than an actual human emotion. And then there's the other thing. When the relationship deepens. When there's trust, routine, shared history. When there's a person sleeping in your bed who matters to you more than anyone else. The good days, the bad days, the days when she loves you with an intensity that fills you with gratitude, and the days when she's exhausted and thinks, without malice, without drama, with the purest honesty that only exists in unfiltered thought, that something about you is wearing her down. She doesn't say it. Because thoughts aren't declarations. Because you also have thoughts you'd never say out loud. But you know. And knowing that she thought it, even for 3 seconds on a Tuesday afternoon, is something you cannot unlearn. You lie next to her at night with your eyes open. One night you can't sleep. It's 2 a.m. You open the window, and from your floor you pick up someone's mental stream from the building across the street. It's not the usual mental noise. It's something dark, concentrated, heavy in a specific way you've never felt before. It's someone thinking about not going on, not as an abstract thought, as a plan. You freeze for 5 seconds that feel like 5 hours. Then you call 911. You give them the building, the approximate floor, a description of what you heard, without being able to explain how. The operator asks you to calm down, to be more specific. And you can't be more specific without telling the truth. And the truth is not an option right now. You spend the rest of the night staring at that window. By morning, you won't know how it ended. You have no way of knowing. And that uncertainty, the only one you have left in a world where almost none exist anymore, is the most unbearable of all. You discover something that night. The ability doesn't just give you information, it gives you responsibility. The responsibility of knowing things nobody else knows, and either acting on them or not acting, and living with what comes after. And nobody prepared you for that. Nobody can. You go through a phase where you try to quietly use it for good. When you sense a coworker is on the verge of breaking down, you show up before the cracks show. On the subway, when you pick up on someone in a state that worries you, you sit nearby without saying anything, just being there. Sometimes someone looks at you, surprised that you noticed something they weren't showing. And in that moment, there's something that actually feels like real human connection. But you can't scale it, because there's always someone suffering in silence within 50 meters. If you try to respond to everything you receive, you come apart in 6 weeks. You learn the lesson no school ever teaches. Empathy without limits isn't a virtue. It's self-destruction. The best doctors in the world have had to build a wall between the suffering they perceive and their own stability. You have to learn the same thing, except your exposure is literally involuntary and absolutely constant. So you build mental walls, routines of isolation, dissociation exercises you invent yourself because no book describes them. You meditate, not because you believed in it before, but because in those 20 minutes when you manage to empty your mind, you receive nothing from the outside. And those 20 minutes are the only real silence you get all day. Silence, something you never valued before, becomes the most precious thing in the world. Years pass. You learn to live with it the way you learn to live with a chronic injury. You have work. You have, with a lot of care and a lot of filtering, a small circle of people whose company doesn't destroy you. You even have, with all the complications you already know come with it, a relationship. The person you choose isn't perfect. Their thoughts aren't either. But there's something in their mental stream, in the texture of how they process the world, that is fundamentally good, not performatively good. Good at the root, the kind of goodness that doesn't need an audience. You know it because you've read it directly, without filters, without performance. And that, which in any other context might look like a violation of privacy, becomes the most solid foundation of trust you've ever had with anyone. There's a paradox at the center of all of this that takes you years to put into words. The ability that makes surface-level connection impossible is the very same one that, at its deepest expression, allows for the most profound connection imaginable. When someone knows everything about you, because you know everything about them, and they still chose to stay, that doesn't have a name anymore. Or it has every name at once. But the price is structural loneliness. The kind of loneliness that can't be cured with company, because it doesn't come from the absence of people. It comes from the absence of reciprocity. You know all of them. They don't know you. They live alongside a version of you that is real but incomplete. And the missing part is exactly the part that defines who you are now. You are the most informed person about the world around you, and at the same time the least known. The person who listens most, and the one who can least be listened to. the translator of a language nobody else speaks, that has no written form, and that dies with you when you go. You reach old age carrying the weight of thousands of other people's minds. A tiredness that isn't yours. A memory full of moments you didn't live but carry anyway. A permanent grief for every ending you saw coming before it arrived. There's one last thing you learn at the end. Something no philosophy book ever gave you. The reason human beings can't read each other's minds is not a flaw in the design. It's the most important protection in the system. The privacy of thought exists so that every person can be, in the one space that nobody can enter, completely themselves. So that the darkest, most contradictory, most frightened thoughts can exist without consequences, processed without an audience, dissolved without damage. You could always get in, and you spent an entire life learning that wasn't a privilege. It was a responsibility nobody asked you to carry, and that you never got to put down. By the end, the only thing you want is a silence that hasn't existed for you in decades. And the supreme irony, the universe's final joke, is that in that precise moment, for the first time since that morning so many years ago, the noise stops. Silence. Just yours. And it's exactly as beautiful as you always imagined it would be. That's what's waiting for you if the most wished-for power in history ever gets granted. An ability that sounds like a gift and functions like a life sentence in the most intimate prison there is, the minds of everyone you've ever known. Next time you wish you knew what someone really thought of you, remember this: there's a reason you can't, and that reason is protecting you far more than you realize. That's all for today. Subscribe if you want to keep living lives you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. And drop in the comments which superpower you think would actually be a curse. Spoiler: almost all of them are.